Welcome back to If I Ever Live to Be. I'm very excited to invite back my good friend, my mentor, business leader, all around. You're just a good person, Randy. And I'm so glad you're back on the show. And we're going to talk. This is your 12th book, Practical Virtue, this morning. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's always good to spend time with you, Whitney.
Absolutely. So, first of all, congratulations on this new book.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's a little different from some of your prior writings, and we're really going to tap into Gen Z. And but don't close your ears if you're not Gen Z, because we have advice and a role and a purpose to play for our seasoned leaders that have that life experience in the show too. So let's just start off by what really inspired you to write Practical Virtue.
So, first of all, thanks for being willing to talk about this. I think it's such an important topic, and it probably goes back many years for me. I've always just had the good fortune to spend time with college students, young professionals, early career professionals. To this day, I still speak at Samford University at least 3 or 4 times a year. And in these conversations with college seniors all the way up to probably early 30s, I find that I'm spending time with them. I'm mentoring a number of them. And I just feel like it's a very underserved population in the workforce. We're just not doing enough as businesses, I think, and leaders to invest in this generation. It's a bit of a cliche, but they're going to run the world one day. Well, guess what? That day is kind of here.
Yes.
I know some startups right now with some amazing Gen Z leaders that are crushing it. So I think the premise, very simply to answer your question, was based on all these conversations, my observations, my conversations with my executive coaching clients, is here's a group of people that has so much talent, so much ability, and we're not doing enough to help them, but we're not doing enough to learn from them. This is not a one-way conversation. So we've got to engage in this book, Practical Virtue, an actionable guide to become a better leader, or a leader worth following, I'm sorry, is really meant to facilitate some really cool conversations that hopefully we'll get to talk about.
So given that, do you feel like companies are, as a whole, are contributing to this lack of guidance for Gen Z in the workplace? Like, are we missing the mark when it comes to training our aspiring leaders, and not just the hard skills, right, but those soft skills?
I think so. So I'll come at that really good question from a couple of different angles. I think we have to kind of look in the mirror as maybe more seasoned leaders, millennial to boomer, and ask ourselves: do we wag our finger at Gen Z sometimes and say, why don't they get it? What's wrong with them? Why are they asking those questions? Why do they want this or that? I think we all have a tendency to do it. I know I've done it. And I think we have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, are we really being fair? How much time have we actually invested in getting to know this generation and their gifts, because they've got amazing gifts,
Right.
but also are we investing in sharing our stories with them? And I don't mean just the success stories. I also mean when we have struggled, failed, and learned. That's even more valuable. So I think as individual leaders listening to this today, I think we all could do a better job of spending time with this group. Companies do what companies do. This is typically going to be delegated to our friends in human resources. They're amazing. However, they tend to be very programmatic approaches. Sign up for the course, go through this, read this book, whatever. And it's only part of the equation. I think it actually takes time, a mentor-mentee relationship, maybe using this book as a guide to really help this generation, Gen Z early career, to really accelerate and thrive. So I do think systemically we've got issues, but I also think individually, if you're listening today, maybe we are the problem and we could do something about it.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I'm going to ask, it's really a 2-part compounded question off of that, but you talk so much about taking ownership as well. So I'd love for you to highlight, because the senior leaders have a role in this, as do Gen Zers, right? Like Gen
Yes.
Z can't just sit by and wait for someone to come take them under their wing, and senior leaders can't wait for someone to come and ask a question. So can you tell us what each role is, both for that senior leader and Gen Z that's looking to, advance in the workplace and truly become that leader worth following?
Absolutely. Good question. So, I'll kind of come at this first from the perspective of the mentee. Now, I'm not Gen Z, obviously,
Neither
but
am I.
but I spend a lot of time with them and I listen to what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And if you look at all the Gallup surveys, all the data, the vast majority of them are looking to be mentored, to be grown, to be developed. They want to understand a little bit more about the why we do things. So here's a group of people raising their hand saying, please invest in me. I want to engage better, but I don't really understand what to do or why we're doing this. Spend time with me, teach me. So here's a group that's saying out loud, and they're surveyed all the time, we need some help. So the book, Practical Virtue, is meant to give them ready access to dozens of virtues that are also amazing soft leadership skills and character building skills. So if you're just a mentee, or I'm sorry, a Gen Zer who really wants to grow, picking the book up and going through it in a self-guided way would be very wise. It would help you. But I think there's a step that you can also take. If you feel like you really need someone to invest in you, to your point, don't wait for them to come by your cube. Don't wait for them to invite you. Why don't you reach out to senior leaders who you respect and admire, people who you think have something to give, and respectfully ask that man or woman, I would really like to get coffee with you. I'd like to continue growing. Would you give me some of your time? And be respectful of their time as well, of that person's time, but invite them into a meeting and then maybe take the extra bolder step and give them a copy of Practical Virtue. Maybe you've read it or you're reading it, but give your
Yes.
mentor, potential mentor, a copy of the book and ask them if they'll go on this guided journey with you. So as a mentee, take your leadership development onto yourself, get a book like this one or this one, and then maybe invite someone into that symbiotic circle of learning with you and ask them to spend time with you. Now, if you're a mentor, potential mentor, millennial or older, take a look around you. This could be at work, it could be in your friend group, it could be in your family, it could be your children, nephews, nieces, whatever. And take a look at where are right now some early career professionals that you feel like, okay, I'm going to take up the charge, the mantle of this responsibility, and I'm going to go pick a few of them. I'm going to give them a copy of the book. And every 4 to 6 weeks, I'm going to commit to this person that I'd like to get coffee with you. Maybe it's a Zoom call, whatever it takes to tap into what they're getting from the book, to share stories, failures, and successes, not just successes, but failures too, and go on the journey with them. That kind of guided tour is going to be invaluable for both mentor and mentee. And you know what? If you're really interested in development and you're a more senior leader, I hope that you'll take this seriously. You're going to learn a lot from Gen Z. They're amazing, smart people. So let's not go just to teach and share. Let's also go to listen and learn. So that's my formula, I think, Whitney, for both groups learning and helping each other on a guided tour. I hope that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I love that jointed approach that involves everyone, right? Everyone
Yeah.
has a role to play in this. And I should also mention that each chapter is a virtue. So you have 29 virtues here, and you could really pick and start with chapter 11 if you wanted to.
Yes.
You can, read one chapter a day. You can skip around if there's a particular area that you're struggling with, or know a Gen Zer that's struggling in that area. But I love that you mentioned talking about the struggles just as much as the successes, right? Because I feel, especially in our digital world, that Gen Zers, and well, we've probably all experienced this at some point, where we feel like we're behind. We see someone else's success at a
Yeah.
certain age and we're not there. We're on the wrong track. How do I get there? They just feel like, well, I woke up and I opened LinkedIn or Instagram or, your favorite social media of choice, and I'm just supposed to be at this level. But I would wager, Randy, many of these virtues that you learned through your life and career are hard fought
Oh yeah.
virtues to learn. I'd love for you to highlight some of those and talk about them, and maybe one that was harder to learn than one of the others for you.
Well, you listen, you're definitely on point, and this book is written from a very raw personal perspective. Either I've experienced it or I've observed it. So if you read anything I write in any of my books, it's always going to be very personal. So I'm going to begin with the very first virtue, which is the virtue of acceptance.
Mm,
And that's a very personal story, but a powerful one because I tell the story about my wife and we have two children, but our older son, who's 27 now, has autism. And I talk about going through the process of learning to accept his diagnosis, but also recognize what a true gift and blessing our son is in our lives.
mm,
So going from woe is us, look at this challenge, look what we're having to deal with, it's really hard. You're going to face adversity like that. But if you practice the virtue of acceptance and go beyond the immediate difficulty and start to see the blessing of the gift of acceptance, the gift of the difficulty, I guess.
right.
To me, that's super powerful. And my wife and I have been in a place now for most of his life where we see what a blessing, not a burden, our son is. He's a great gift, and we've been chosen to be his parents. He's been chosen to be our son, and we are blessed. So I think starting out of the gate with how do we look at adversity a little bit differently and not just go, woe is me, but go, wow, it's me. I get to be the beneficiary of this great lesson. So that's one of my favorites, and that's how we begin the book.
No, I love that. And I mean, um, just hearing you tell that story, I can see where so many of these virtues one ties into the other because
Mhm.
I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but even I had earmarked hard work for myself,
Mhm.
and I love you listed out the opportunity to be compensated for well done results, the opportunity to potentially earn stock, the opportunity to be developed, mentored, and grown by leaders in the company. If we view it as all opportunities,
Mhm.
I feel like that changes how we can truly embrace those challenges.
We have been on this really interesting roller coaster ride with how companies attract talent now for a very
Mm,
long time. And one of the things that I really am concerned about, and it's kind of the pendulum's gone back the other way, but there were so many carrots being dangled out there. Come to work for us. We've got all these benefits, all these things. We're
yeah.
lucky to have you. And I grew up in a generation where all I was ever given was simply the opportunity to get in the door.
Yes.
And but I was always promised very candidly, if you work hard, if you make the most of this opportunity, the sky's the limit. So the first 25 years of my career, all I really knew was I've got a chance, but it's up to me to make the most of that
Yes.
chance. So that's where the virtue of hard work comes in. Just quite frankly, old fashioned hustle. And I think we don't talk about that enough. And I want Gen Z to see that at the end of the day, if you rely on your hard work, your grit and determination and just apply yourself, nothing will stop you. And I don't think we teach that anymore.
I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to see too, because I'm even thinking back, to watching my parents, Randy. I feel like they really instilled that into me, right? Like, I even think back to if you weren't going to school or work, you were very sick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there was something pretty serious that was going to prevent you from calling in that day. So absolutely. Well, and I feel like that's a perfect tie-in because I love to hear you talk about credibility
Mhm.
and possibly because it almost feels like this elusive virtue because it's one of those that takes time to build.
Mhm.
Um, uh, but it's also one of those that it's almost hard to gauge whether or not you're on the right track. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, if you're a listener, I would ask yourself with a little humor is ask yourself the last time someone actually talked about credibility with you. It's like the unspoken thing that we all know
Mm,
is out there, but we never talk about it. So the virtue of credibility, especially for, well, it's not just for Gen Z, it's all generations. But I think understanding that you're being judged from the very first moment you engage with someone else. So, if you're going to an interview and you're less than appropriately dressed, if you're unshaven, if you fail to follow up with a thank you note within 24 hours, if you say you'll do something and then don't follow up, all of those things are dings on your credibility. How do
yes.
you know if you didn't do a great job? You probably won't get the job. You won't move forward in a process. You won't get the opportunity because someone has maybe dismissed you for being, not having credibility. So I think talking about what does it take to be credible, and that chapter gives you 10 very meaty best practices. But I go even further and talk about how do I find accountability partners who will help me
Mm.
stay on the credibility path. I think it's one of the most important lessons in the entire book because if you master credibility, quite frankly, you'll put yourself in a position to win every day.
Well, and this is probably going to make me sound old school, but that's okay. I feel like we have some of those tried and true processes, for lack of a better term, that still work today. It's like you said, like dressing for the interview, sending that
Mhm.
follow up note. I go back to the adage of if it's not broke, don't fix it. These are
Yeah.
things that are proven and they work. And just because, we've been doing it for years on end doesn't mean we should throw that out the window just because it's 2025.
I always joke with people. I think I was born an old soul because, even though I'm a Gen Xer today, even when I was, a young man starting out, I still, always embodied and tried to live by the traditions and the norms that I saw that were working. And maybe
Mm,
that's the key to what you're saying. If it's working, don't try to reinvent it. I think we over encourage innovation and new ideas.
yeah.
I love innovation and new ideas. I love thinking outside the box. I'm all about that. But sometimes courtesy and doing what you say you're going to do and follow up and the old handwritten thank you note, they're timeless, timeless. So
Yes.
the virtue of credibility does not have to be some innovative new concept. If you've got one, I'd love to hear it. But I included in the chapter the things that will always work for you. I don't care what generation you're from, they will always work for you.
And let's dive into that credibility excuse me, gratitude as well, because um gratitude in your book is chapter 12, and then
Yeah.
hard work follows that at chapter 13.
Hmm.
And it may not seem that way on the outlook, but I think both of those are so intertwined, right? It goes back to that opportunity. I'm thankful I have the opportunity
Hmm.
to work hard and advance in this company, in my career. Um, Talk to us about that in gratitude and just the weight of it and how
Hmm.
it really impacts our perspective.
Just, Whitney, ask yourself as you think about your daily engagements. You're a busy person. You run a very robust company. You've got all kinds of great discussions going on. How do you feel when someone just takes a minute and says, "I am so grateful for your time, Whitney. Thank you for that." You're smiling right now. I mean, it brings
Yes.
a glow. It's like, oh my gosh, thank you. You've immediately
Yes.
changed the dynamic of a conversation. So the virtue of gratitude is not just oh yeah, I've got to bring up gratitude because someone did something nice. What if you actually live a life founded on that foundation of gratitude? I'm grateful when I wake up
Yeah.
in the morning. I'm grateful to have my health. I'm grateful for a family that loves me. I'm grateful to get to do meaningful work. I'm grateful to be able to write books and be on shows with Whitney Mendoza. I'm grateful. And because that is the dominating virtue that tends to, it's the prism through which I see the world, I feel like I've got more joy, happiness, fulfillment. the world is just better. So if you're listening to this, Gen Z or any generation, definitely think about what is to be gained by living a life filled with gratitude. Everything is to be gained. So yeah, I'm grateful even for my struggles. I'm grateful if I've got a really difficult task in front of me because maybe I'll learn something from it. Maybe it's going to benefit somebody else. So not to beat a dead horse, we could talk about gratitude for 6 hours. Gratitude is a wonderful way to live.
Yeah. Well, and what another theme that I hear echoed out of that is the rest, the pause, the taking the time to
Hmm.
do all of this. I just did a presentation on the importance of connections, and one of the last things I left the audience with was you cannot rush this process. It cannot be rushed. Gratitude cannot be rushed because you're just going to breeze over all the things you should be grateful for. Um, the senior leader, we're all so busy, but to really pour into something and create those lasting engagements that are really going to be part of your legacy. Pouring into that Gen Zer that's going to grow up maybe in the same company or go off and start their own company. And they're going to remember that
Hmm.
CEO, Mr. or Ms. took time out of their busy day and spent it with me. And I can even see, that's the reflection virtue. That's probably some self-discipline. You've got to be in control of your calendar and your time and that stewardship. I would love to hear you talk about that as well, Randy.
Sure. Can I go back to gratitude for a second?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I want to tell you my favorite gratitude story
Yeah.
because it involves a Gen Zer, and it's my favorite by far. So I do a lot of work with the SEC, the Southeastern Conference,
Yes.
and I get to work with their student athletes every year. So I was in front of a group in December last year, and I was talking about, and we were on the topic of gratitude. And it was so amazing, and none of this was scripted. But a student in the back of the room, a young lady, raised her hand and she said, "Mr. Hain, excuse me for interrupting. I just wanted to say something." Sure. And she said her name and she said, "I was given one of your other books by one of my coaches, and it really made a difference in my life. And I have written you a thank you note. May I give it to you now?" I'm like, "Absolutely, you can." So she walks up
Wow.
in front of like 45 student athletes that were all like, "Oh my gosh." And I just gave her a big bear hug. It was like the
Yeah.
coolest thing ever.
Wow.
But what do you think I'm willing to do to help that young lady in the future? Anything. The gratitude, the humility, the beautiful note she wrote me. I mean, it was moving, and I mean to this day people still talk about it. But this, I think she might have been all of 2021. She knew that she felt this desire to be grateful. She
Mm.
wrote me a nice note, and she gave it to me on a stage that probably influenced the behavior of 40 or 50 other people. It's my favorite story, and it came from someone who's Gen Z, and I love it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I echo your sentiments. Wow. And I mean, again, just that small spark to do that in front of others, and you just never know the ripple effect that that's going to have.
I,
Yeah. No, go ahead, Randy.
no, I think
Yeah.
your other question though, and
Yes.
please make sure I get this
Yeah.
correctly. You were talking about some of the other virtues like reflection and
Yes.
self-discipline. There is a lot in the book that I would describe as countercultural,
Mm.
maybe even counterintuitive, because I don't think we talk a lot about reflection and thinking and quiet and the beauty of self-discipline.
Yes.
It's really just stay engaged all the time, stay wired all the time, have your face in your phone all the time. And I'm not a luddite. I don't hate technology. I use it every day. But I really want to promote in this book for this generation the idea that you can have a little bit more mastery over where you spend your time. And if you're plugged in all the time, you're going to miss out on the beauty of nature, the beauty of relationships, the beauty of a great conversation.
Yes.
All of those things are lost if you're always connected. So, like in the chapter on the virtue of reflection, I'm a very reflective person, and it's taken me decades to really refine that virtue in my life. But I get so many gold nuggets out of that practice. So I walk every day, I think every day. I have dedicated time in the mornings that is scheduled for reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that, I say this with humility, that's where 12 books comes from. That's where the richness of my life comes from, because I take the time to think about not only where I'm going, but where have I been? I blog every Sunday or Monday, and that is always coming out of some reflection I'm doing at 7 a.m. over coffee on Sunday mornings about what's happened to me since I last wrote. So I think if all of us, not just Gen Z, but all of us, would embrace this idea of a more disciplined, thoughtful, quiet-filled approach to living, I think we would all be well served, and I think we would all be more thoughtful, reflective people.
Agreed. Very much agreed.
Yeah.
Randy, your 12th book, Practical Virtue, it's available on Amazon.
Yes.
I encourage everyone, just as Randy did, Gen Zers get it, connect with a mentor, senior leaders get it, share copies with those in your life and your company that are looking for that guidance. What's a final thought that you would like to leave us with, Randy?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many things in the book that I loved writing it. I love putting it together. But one of my favorite things in the book is the foreword that was written by my dear friend, Dr. Paul Voss. And he wrote about, in the foreword, the virtue of magnanimity. And magnanimity is a very noble virtue. And it's based on this idea that the seed of greatness has been planted in all of us. God has given all of us a calling, a vocation. And magnanimity is the virtue that has you thinking about, how do I activate that greatness? How do I discover it and activate it in my life? And the reason it's so powerful in this book is if you read the entire book, if you activate the other virtues in your life, almost by definition, you're going to be doing something that promotes magnanimity. You're focused on your calling, and the other virtues activate it. So magnanimity is this idea that you were made for something very special. Read the book, and it's going to help you attain that virtue. So I think that read the foreword just as carefully as you would the rest of the book. And I hope you read the book from beginning to end. And as you said, you can jump in at any time, but allow yourself the freedom to read the book over the course of a year or longer. This is not a book that I want you to digest in a week. Don't read it over the weekend. That would be a waste. Read a chapter, do the exercise at the end that I give you, and ponder it for 5 or 6 days. Make it work in your life, then go to the next one. That's how you should use the book, and that's going to help you find magnanimity in your own life.
That's beautiful, and just such a... It's really an essential resource, Randy. So thank you for writing this book. If our listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Really, I think 3 ways. Follow me on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm the most active in terms of social media. So follow me on LinkedIn. My website, my company website is serviumpartners.com, serviumpartners.com. That's where you can learn about my coaching work, leadership development, and my books. And then all my books are on Amazon. You're always welcome to go there and check them out.
Wonderful. This has been great, Randy. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for the time. It's always a pleasure.